Hey there, editing in this prelude before we start the pod because it was recorded yesterday, Wednesday afternoon, before we got the news late Wednesday that FC Dallas had 4 additional positive tests, this time 3 players and 1 coaching staff member, which now brings the number up to 9 players, 1 staff member since arriving in Orlando, and that doesn't count the 3 players that tested positive even before they left Dallas to go to the tournament. Buzz is counting that at this point, the club still has 19 players on the roster who have not tested positive, and there are no signs yet or indications that the team is in danger of having to forfeit the game or the tournament. That said, it is likely that by the time you listen to this, we may have even more positive tests since they are only now entering the window where players exposed during travel or in Florida could begin to test positive. There are still possibilities people exposed back in Dallas could continue to also test positive. Buzz is on top of this. You can follow him on Twitter at ThirdDegreeNet and obviously on his website, thirddegree.net. Now on to the pod. Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to another episode of Third Degree, the podcast. Hi, I'm Peter, and joining me today is a different group of people. First off, our longtime friend and the dean of soccer journalism in Dallas, the great Steve Davis. Hello, Steve.
Howdy, boys.
And, of course, your hero and mine, the founder and editor of thirddegree.net, Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Hello, Peter, calling in today from Orlando, Florida, where I'm complete lockdown, isolated, and on my own.
Well, we had talked about doing this podcast and sourcing Steve for some great insight on the tournament itself, but things have changed a little bit, and we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon, just hours after Buzz broke the news of yet another set of positive tests for FC Dallas, and it turns out that of all the positive tests that MLS have reported, I think I'm saying this right, Buzz, all of them are FC Dallas players.
Yes, all 6 that they have admitted to in Orlando are FC Dallas players.
So just to provide a little background, you started reporting on this more than a week ago with an original set of players. Well, the original COVID positive test, which I think we found out later on to be Jesus Freya, correct?
Yeah, that was back at the beginning of June 3rd.
And then there was another set of players prior to departure that tested positive.
Correct. That was on June 18th, which was a Thursday and or Friday the 19th. And at the time, we released both of the names, and I will tell you that since then, one of them returned to training, which you can only do when you are cleared and tested negative, and the other one did not travel and has been isolated since then. So
all right,
that was the situation up till before the team left.
So the team got on a plane, traveled to Orlando. Why don't you catch everybody up on what's happened in the last few days?
Yeah, this is where it got chaotic. As I said, the one player that had previously tested positive was obviously negative because he had been training before they left. And according to FC Dallas and Major League Soccer, quote, upon arrival, 2 players for FC Dallas tested positive. Now, I know who these players are, and I have chosen, in my first report, I put the names out, and I have chosen since then, I've changed my mind. I've decided not to put out the names. But what I can tell you is that, for me, this is where the problems begin, because upon arrival is the key phrase. I don't know whether that means Saturday when the team actually arrived, or if it means Sunday morning, because the team trained Sunday morning, and of those 2 players, one of them can be seen in the pictures and the B-roll from the Sunday morning training session. So there obviously was some sort of delay between these first 2 positive players and pulling them out of training. And I'm assuming that this is what's causing the problem. Now, that's an assumption on my part, but if a player is tested positive and trains, that's got to be bad. So they must have not gotten the information until after the training on Sunday. And then on Monday, the 29th, they had a 3rd player test positive. And then yesterday, Tuesday, the 30th, they had 3 more players test positive. So that's where we are with 6 players testing positive since arriving, but them leaving with no players having tested positive because the one guy had been cleared and the other guy didn't travel. So that's where we are, and that's how we get 6 guys all in a bubble with FC Dallas.
Now, you have shared a little bit of detail information. While not naming names, you do have a sense of the mix of the type of players in relation to their importance as being starters or bench players.
Yeah, of the 6 in Orlando, you could definitely say that some of them are starters or potentially were going to be starters. It's roughly 50-50 mix of starters and or probably not starters, and it's a little bit of a mix of young and old, and it's a little bit of a mix of domestic and foreign. So there's no like click, like just as a pure example that didn't happen, it's not like 3 homegrowns went out to a bar and like they all 3 tested. It's a total mix among the team. Even positionally, it's a mix too. So it's not the indicators are that it's something that happened from a group scenario of either the whole team on the plane or the whole team in that first Sunday training session.
All right, so it seems like a fair time to bring in the good Steve Davis. Steve, do you have any particular insight or thoughts about all of this as this has kind of been coming out over the last few days?
So I don't have any particular insight for you as far as personnel or something like that. What I guess I would say is that I understand. My understanding of this and my research shows that you can have this thing, and up to 4 days later, you got about a 50% chance of a false negative. In other words, you're not going to test positive right away. Like if you test the day that you are actually exposed, there's pretty much a 100% chance you are going to show negative.
Right.
So in other words, it takes a few days for this for a definite false for a definite positive to reveal itself. So I guess my question is, is this something that, as Buzz suggested, it's now being spread, the contagion is being spread like on the plane and at team events, or was this something that was picked up back in Dallas, or back in Frisco area, where we know in Texas, like in California and like in some other states, Arizona, whatever, the cases are spiking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there might be some kind of distinction there, because we can get into this a little bit later. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I had this theory that's quickly being doused. But I had this theory that because these are young players and some of them are going out, or just some of them are just family guys that want to be around family, whatever, that by putting them in the bubble, they might actually be safer. You might actually be able to contain this thing better than if they were, in our home state right now, where the thing is really spiking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I really thought that might be the case. Now, I think the perfect storm where that wouldn't be the case is if 2 or 3 guys get it in Dallas, or in wherever the home market is, be that Kansas City, Minnesota, whatever, they get it right before they leave, and then they start spreading it as the team gets into the bubble. I think that's the worst case scenario, and who knows? Maybe that's what we're looking at here.
Yeah, I think you've really hit the nail on the head in terms of my understanding about how the virus appears in the body and the timing and so forth. It's pretty clear to me that the people that have tested positive in Orlando didn't get it, were not exposed to it in Orlando. They were exposed to it in Dallas, because it can take up to 5 days for the body to build a viral load enough for a test to detect it. Now, there's a lot of vagaries and varieties of that based on the time, the person individually, and then also the tests. Like all the different tests have different levels of sensitivity. But I think it is pretty clear that at least the 6 that have tested now, they have been in Orlando for such a short amount of time. It's unlikely that their positive test is due to an exposure since they've arrived in Orlando. And the larger concern, in which ties back to Buzz's note of the particular player that was in training on Sunday morning, is how many more positive results are the team likely to see in the coming days for all of the guys that have been exposed since they've landed in Orlando. And I think that's the thing at this point everybody needs to kind of keep their eye on and their fingers crossed.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with the protocols. Maybe Buzz is a little bit more familiar, but are the players, I believe as with NBA, they're required to be in their rooms. No players can be in other people's rooms. Are they doing the proper things away from the field? And if that's the case, then there's probably a decent chance that this thing hasn't gone through the team. But Buzz, do you know about that?
Well, I do know that upon arrival, they're quarantined for, I think it's 12 hours, and they arrived Saturday late afternoon, so they were quarantined until the next morning, basically. And then, as far as I know, specifically in FC Dallas's case, they have shut down the last 2 days, like yesterday and today. They did not train and have been basically in quarantine, and that information came from Taylor Twellman, and I did get that confirmed myself independently. So, effectively, in Dallas's case, they trained 2 days. They trained Sunday and Monday. No, just Sunday. Goodness. Oh, no, today's Wednesday. I'm sorry. Let me back up 1 second. Today and yesterday, they did not train. So they did, in fact, train 2 days. I just fumbled the crap out of that. Sunday and Monday, they trained. So all of these cases are either happening from 2 days of exposure once they got here, or the day they traveled, or a couple of days before they left Dallas. As you say, because it's a 4 or 5 day window, and we can see a ramping up of these testings where it was like 2, 1, and then 3. As guys probably got exposed over the plane ride and then a couple of days in Orlando that they trained. So it's entirely possible that there's going to be more tests. There's all kinds of crazy rumors flying around about this team right now, and I'm not running anything else unless I get it confirmed, that we are hearing for sure that there are more tests, or not. If I hear that there's not more tests, that'll be great too.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm not clear on, though, is... So if you take any of these players, these 6 players, what I think I understand to be correct, and Steve, you may know this, Buzz, you may, please speak up, this does not mean that these 6 players are automatically done for 14 days, that there are some other abilities or rules or procedure that allows them to continue to be tested and then quote-unquote medically cleared that would allow them to return before 14 days. Is that correct?
That's the language Major League Soccer used, the medically cleared. My assumption is that means test negative and have no symptoms. The 14 days that usually we require people to quarantine is that it takes 7 days to get over the thing and then 7 days more to be safe. That's why you see like doctors say 14. So whatever MLS is doing in line with their entire league policy and whatever doctors they're involved with, you have to hope they know what they're doing, because that's what medically cleared is. Because if we want to go back to one of the very first examples from before, since we've already reported his name, I'll say it again. When Brandon Cervania tested positive, like 4 days later, he was back in training, having been medically cleared, and the other guy never did get back into training and didn't travel. So he obviously was continuing to test positive. So,
and let's
the exact specifics of it all, I don't know.
Yeah, remember the Women's League, the Orlando Pride example, where I believe it was 6 players tested positive. They took the significantly drastic step of withdrawing from the NWSL tournament, and a couple of days later, what was it, half of those came tested. It was revealed that those were false negatives or false positives. So there's that. So I believe, I don't know the official Major League Soccer protocol, but as far as being medically cleared, it's typically, symptom-free for X number of days and X number of negative tests, or 2 negative tests over a period of 2 to 4 days or something like that. So yeah, it is absolutely the case that quarantining just means, if you or I right now flying to New York, it just means, hey, we don't know if you have anything, so you just be by yourself for 14 days, and we just all hope for the best. And by the way, if you get it, then go to the hospital, but don't be around anybody in the meantime. So yeah, that's not necessarily a 14-day window that you're out. It's just until you're medically cleared, as you said.
So, considering that, by all accounts, Dallas is the only team with positive tests in Orlando, is that some sort of indication of, is it just unfortunate luck? Is it a group of players that maybe were going through Dallas was handling it differently from every other club in the league? Is that a reflection, kind of to your point a little bit earlier, Steve, that they just have a much younger staff that maybe was a little bit more brazen in how they treated themselves when they were out away from the team? That's the one thing out of all this that bothers me, is how did Dallas end up being the only one with this many positive tests, or actually any positive tests at all?
So those are all legitimate questions. My questions, in response to your questions, would be what other teams are doing testing on their own, as some teams are, as FC Dallas was, before they leave for Orlando. How forthcoming are they being about the rate of tests? We know there have been positive tests, for example, in Miami. But I don't know what the league requirements are for these teams revealing any positive tests before they get to Orlando. Now, once they get to Orlando, I believe that's where the league steps in, and they are updating daily on who tests. But that's once teams arrive in Orlando, and I know there are teams around it. Buzz, correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't even think LA gets in for almost another week. So there are still teams en route to Orlando. Some teams aren't even there yet. So I don't know what their testing is back at home, and I don't know what their policy is on information sharing.
Right. No,
yeah, basically teams are still arriving like 2 teams per day because they don't want to strain the system in Orlando. So it's a tapered arrival. And Steve's correct that there was a Colorado positive case and there was a New England positive case. And one of the Athletic articles mentioned that the league did not require teams to disclose their own positive tests. So there's no requirement for any of these teams to let any of this stuff out other than what the league's doing in Orlando.
So, I mean, in theory, prior to anybody getting to Orlando, it's possible that every team in the league has had at least one positive test. They just haven't told anybody about it yet.
That's
very
correct.
possible. I mean, all the rumbles we've been hearing behind the scenes are pretty much every team in every sport and every level of soccer has got multiple cases, and it's just they're all trying to keep it on the down low.
Interesting. Well, I guess we'll just have to keep an eye on it. Certainly in Dallas's case, with 6 players at the current stage, and some of those being starters, that is a bit worrisome. The other question is Dallas now at a disadvantage that they've lost 2 days of training going into the tournament? Do we know what and by the way, weren't they supposed to scrimmage NYCFC here in the next few days? Is that on still or off? Does anybody know?
I don't know if it's still on. They were supposed to scrimmage NYCFC on July 4, and don't know if it's still on or off. I guess NYCFC might have something to say about it as well, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, there's a rumor it was canceled, but we don't know anything definitive. I mean, we only learned about it because New York City put out a press release, so maybe they'll put out another one saying it's canceled.
Yeah, that's true. We only found out about it from them. I forgot about that. Okay, well, I guess we can put a pin in that and just keep an eye on it. And obviously, you guys who are listening to the pod, follow Buzz at Third Degree Net on Twitter, as that's a great place and resource to get the latest on all of this stuff, because Buzz has been doing some good reporting on that.
Our man Buzz is getting national recognition. He is absolutely doing a smashing job on the reporting on all this.
Yeah, and you know what? To be fair to Buzz, it's a sensitive and weird subject in that you're dealing with people's medical information, and
Sure.
and you want to be respectful of that stuff. But at the same time, this is the conversation Buzz and I had. If the Dallas Cowboys had 4 players test positive for COVID in the weeks before the season started, the media it'd be like headlines everywhere. Everybody would be all over it. So credit to Buzz for figuring out the best way to handle it and get the information out, the base information out that needed to be out there.
Well, and Peter, if I may, you asked a question a minute ago about other teams. Can I just suggest that if 26 teams in Major League Soccer had a Buzz that was a cop on the beat like he is, that we'd probably know a lot more about a lot more positive tests.
Yeah, no, I agree. We are very fortunate to have Buzz. If you're a fan of the old FC Dallas. All right.
That sound you're hearing is me blushing in the background. Thanks, guys.
There's all kinds of jokes there. I'll just leave it.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the tournament, and I think we'll just get this part of it out of the way because it without question, it's the one thing that I'm 99% sure the three of us are all going to agree to, which is it is literally impossible to predict the outcome of this tournament, how it's going to play out. It is literally a roll of the dice, and that if you think you can predict it, you are kidding yourself. Are we all in agreement on this?
I certainly am. I mean, you could try, and we will probably try because that's what we do. And I also think that you can make certain assumptions. We know Atlanta, is a very talented team, and to predict that they're going to make the round of 16, I don't think is going out on a limb. Same for LAFC, although Carlos Vela, who knows? Depending on who decides. I don't believe, unless I'm wrong, we haven't had a significant Major League Soccer League MLS player come out and say, "Hey, I'm not going to this thing just yet," as we did with NWSL and several of the prominent U.S. women's national team players. So we can make some assumptions, but outside of that small little, top the cream of the crop up there, man, I just don't know what kind of assumptions you can make because I think it's going to be 100% a free-for-all depending on so many different factors.
Let me just throw in a note because you brought up his name. Both Carlos Vela and Chicharito's wives are pregnant and due to give birth. I'm not clear if both of them or just Vela's wife is actually scheduled to give birth somewhere in the window of the tournament, which obviously creates a problem because my understanding is that if you leave the bubble, you're not allowed back in. So I think there's some speculation out there that don't be surprised if one or both of those star players do not play in the tournament strictly for that reason. And it's possible they're trying to keep that on, they're trying to wait as long as possible before coming down with that decision. But that certainly either one or both of those guys missing the tournament for the very understandable reason would greatly impact the tournament overall.
Yeah, I believe if they won't let you near your newborn baby if you've not tested positive, just been exposed to people that have tested positive. They won't let you in. I'm like, listen, I'm dealing with a family issue with the hospital right now. I can tell you that if you have been exposed to COVID, they're not letting you in.
Yeah.
So.
Well, they shouldn't. I mean, it's a newborn baby without a functioning immune system. So, that's life or death stuff. So I don't think anybody would. It would be a disappointment if somebody like Carlos Vela is prominent as he is in the league if he didn't play in this tournament. But I don't think there's a reasonable soul out there that would blame him.
No, not at all. No, it's just look. All of this is trying to make the best of a terrible situation and come up with something that the fans can enjoy and the league can somewhat monetize and so forth. So, if that's how it plays out, that's just how it's going to end up playing out.
Sure.
I also wanted to point out, since we last talked about it, or when we talked about it at some point in the past, MLS has clarified one oddity of the setup of the brackets, which was the fact that Group A was unlike all the other groups with 6 teams in it. And it did seem a bit unfair when they said the best of the third place teams could qualify for the knockout rounds, which seemed to really make Group A unlucky if you were in it. Now, that since then they've announced that the fourth place team in Group A would be considered in the group of best third place teams. So you could have 4 teams out of Group A. And if you didn't hear that change or adjustment in the rules, that's important to know because that does help make Group A much more equitable to all the other groups as we go in and talk about this.
Putting together that 26-team field. I mean, 24 teams, easy. 26, pretty tricky.
Much harder.
Well, it was funny. I when all the news about Dallas came out today, and I started wondering, I said, well, is there a scenario where they send FC Dallas home? And if they do, how do they account for that? And I thought, they'll just stick Nashville back in Dallas's spot. And then I thought, no, that screws up Group A because now that's
can't do that.
They can't do that either. So
yeah.
Oh no!
You can't drop one team; you got to drop 2.
Tournaments
or
none. Tournaments are so hard to organize, and you never make everybody happy.
Yeah.
Poor Andy Swift.
Yeah.
Yeah. Indeed.
Absolutely, indeed. Okay, well, I don't really know where to go with this from here other than just to kind of talk a little bit about, Buzz, do you have any particular direction you want to go in this with in terms of how we want to talk about the tournament?
I thought we could just talk about each of the three matchups FC Dallas has, talk about the opponent a little bit, what we know about them, and whether we think FC Dallas matches up well. And then maybe at the end of that, we can sort of try and make a prediction about where we think Dallas will finish in their group. Because as we guys have talked about, it's impossible to really handicap this thing much beyond that. And then maybe Steve already mentioned LAFC and Atlanta. Maybe we could throw out maybe who else we think might be in a favorites in each group or something, just for kicks.
Fair enough. All right, so Dallas has Vancouver first up on the 9th. That game is at 9:30. I think it's also, is that one of the ESPN games? Do you
No, that's the Univision.
The Univision game. Okay.
TUDN.
Okay. Well, Buzz and Steve, you guys are better at this than I am. I'll let you guys take off with Dallas versus Vancouver.
Steve, would you like to go first?
I guess. Well, I guess the first thing I would say is all of this is contingent on what kind of team Dallas is able to field.
Yeah.
Now Buzz mentioned that some of these guys might be starters, might not be. To be honest with you, I mean, I see maybe two positions on the field where Dallas is a little bit vulnerable. Maybe you could say center back. Depending on which one of these guys, but I see three very capable center backs there. So even there, that is a little bit of cover, and then maybe over on the right side a little bit, because Michael Barrios is so important. But honestly, all over the field, if you scratch out a little too deep depth chart, actually I say too deep. You look at the midfield. I see 8 guys in there without counting Thomas Roberts. I see 8 guys competing for 3 spots. And any one of them, pretty much any arrangement that you could make, especially considering how good Tessman looked, it just doesn't look it doesn't look terrible. It might not be ideal, but any arrangement of those 8 guys for those 3 spots looks pretty good. So that's a good solid core. If Reto Ziegler and Matt Hedges can stay healthy, that's a core. You do have 2 now capable strikers. Cobra scoring before in the brief time that they got to play this year. That in the games against Philly and Montreal, and Frank O'Hara now in the mix, depending on how fit he is. So if as long as this thing doesn't pull too many players off the field for Dallas, I think they're okay. We know that it's probably going to be Jimmy Maurer, not Jesse Gonzalez in goal. That's a little bit of an issue, but Jimmy Maurer is very capable. So for me, it kind of starts there. And then you ask about Vancouver in particular. Heck, man, what an organization in chaos. I mean, just when this would have looked like they had a little bit of their stuff together and making some good hires, and it looked like they had a little bit of stability in the organization. And then they go and make other front office changes at the last minute. I don't know what to say about Vancouver other than they've been a bit of a mess for a while, and it looks to me like if you were going to pick a team to start against in this group, Seattle, San Jose, I would have picked Vancouver, and Dallas gets to start with them.
Steve, one of the things that since we have you on, the big storyline or the big question for me going into the tournament is Jesus Ferreira. When we last saw FC Dallas at the beginning of the season, Jesus didn't have actually 2 very good games, and the game that they were about to play, I think we had learned that he likely was not going to start and Pax was going to take the position. Do you have any sense where Lucci is with Jesus? That's really his player. He really favors him. Have you talked to Lucci or gotten any sense as to where he thinks Jesus is going into the tournament?
I don't. I haven't been able to talk to Lucci just one-on-one in a while, and I will say that, gosh, guys, it seems like it was a year ago now that they played, but I think Jesus was still carrying a little bit of an injury. And so if he wasn't at 100%, Jesus is funny about it. I remember looking at him some of those last trainings, and he'd come off the field early, and he seemed to be limping a little bit, and I'd pull him aside. Jesus, everything good? Yep, everything's good, 100%. But Yeah,
Paxton does that too.
Paxton exactly does that. Paxton did that last year. And right after I talked to Jesus and he tells me that, I asked Paxton, how healthy were you at the end of last year? He's like, I couldn't take a step without pain. And of course I would say, Paxton, you told me you were 100%. He's like, yeah, I did. I know. That's what they are. They're athletes, and you admire it because they're not. The idea is in their minds. I'm not making excuses. If I can walk, I can play. So you admire that. But when Jesus tells me that, I just have to say I'm not convinced that he wasn't carrying a little bit of an injury in those 2 games.
Buzz, any additional thoughts about maybe we may end up repeating some things we talked about last week, but anything you want to add to what Steve said about the first game?
Well, first, let me throw in on the FC Dallas side that I'm hearing more information that a 3-man back line may legitimately be an option, because we talked about they worked on it a bunch in the spring, and last week we kind of said that maybe it's in the back pocket, it's a possibility. Well, no, I've heard more that it's actually legit. That's you got to, let's say maybe a 50-50 chance now, so that you might see that rolled out in game 1. Obviously, available players may dictate a lot of tactics, but that's definitely in the mix as a tool for FC Dallas. Now,
hold on, before you move on, I'm interested. What do you think is driving, if in fact that is the case, what is it tactically that Lucci is trying to correct or change about the team if he is thinking about moving? And is it a kind of a 3-4-2-1, or is it more a traditional 3-5-2?
It was in the spring. It was more a traditional 3-5-2. Some of it may be an attempt to figure out how to play both Cobra and Hara at the same time, perhaps. But my biggest thing is I think that it allows your wings, Hollingshead and Cannon, to be wider and higher, and that lets you then narrow your midfield and your front line. And then if you're using Jesus as a winger, for example, he can play inside as a false wing, more as a 10 almost. It allows Barrios more freedom to come inside, because that's what he wants, is those slashing, angling runs from his wingers. He wants the outside back to make the end line run, not Barrios and not Pico or whoever's on the other side. So those are my guesses as to why you go with that kind of formation. With the 3-man back line too, you can have a little bit more protection when you go up against a 2-striker system. In particular, specifically in reference to Vancouver, they are not, from what I've been reading about them this morning, they're maybe in the middle of transitioning formation, so not 100% sure what they can do. And what they had been doing is a 4-4-2. So it's possible that 3-man back line will be in response to Vancouver. And I can, if you want, I'll just keep going about Vancouver, unless you.
Well, hold on one sec. Hold on one sec. I'm interested to hear from Steve. Steve, do you have any sense that Lucci needs to change the tactics of the team?
So I can tell you for absolute certain that 3-5-2 or 3-4-3, depending on how you kind of shape it. And remember, sometimes the shape changes with Lucci, depending on whether they have the ball or don't have the ball. But I can tell you that 3-man back line was 100% in the plans this year. Look, I'll just tell you, I think we may have even talked about it before. I don't think it's a big secret. They were going to use a 3-man back line on the trip to NYCFC. You remember that before all this started, they were darn near ready to get on the bus to get on the plane when everything got shut down. So don't take this 3-man back line thing as anything they're doing for the tournament or anything they're doing for Vancouver necessarily. This was part of the plan. It was something Lucci wanted to do last year. He just didn't feel like he got far enough along in terms of scheming out everything else and really kind of dialing in the tactics on the 4-man back line. So in the offseason, they spent more time with it. 3-man back line. He wanted the tactical versatility this year to be able to go 4-man or 3-man pretty much at the drop of a hat. And so not any kind of a surprise for me if they go with 3-man against Vancouver or in any of these games and then go back to a 4-man depending on the opposition.
Okay.
Yeah, they used it extensively in the spring in preparation, maybe even
Yeah.
close to half the time in the spring, just so that they could, as Steve says, switch from game to game or even in the middle of a game, tactically fluid.
Okay.
Lucy loves tactically fluid.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. The difference between a 3 and a 4-man back line begs a question. Who's the player that makes the change? Is it a player that shifts his position on the field to account for a 3-man back line, meaning somebody moves from midfield to center back, or who comes off the field so that a center back can come on? Because I'm assuming Ryan and Reggie stay on and just end up pushing upfield. Where does that change come tactically in the roster?
Brisson comes on for a winger. You lose a winger and you add Brisson, basically.
Okay.
So like your front, and then you end up with the 2 in front, your windshield wipers, right? And then your 2 wingers out wide. And then your front combo either stays like a pure 10 with 2 strikers, or if you play 3-4-3, it stays winger striker, 2 winger striker. So it's either round or point,
Okay. Steve, did you have any? I'll ask you this question. Did you have any particular sense as to why Lucci thinks this is an advantage for him tactically to move to a 3-man back line?
So I think sometimes he just felt like the team got a little predictable with that 4-man back line setup, and in terms of the shape of the team moving out of the back. Remember, this team, possession out of the back is everything. And sometimes he thought they got a little stagnant that way. I also think that, just as Buzz said, the ability to shake up the personnel a little bit. Last year we all sort of agreed that left side was an issue. Fafa Picault was brought in to address that, and I think he did okay in the attack, and I think he did exactly what they thought he would do in terms of the press. Last year he may have been the best pressing winger in Major League Soccer, but it still gives them some kind of flexibility in that if look, they can't just keep going to the whip on Michael Barrios. They just play him and play him and play him, and at some point you're going to have to give him some kind of break, and so that it gives you tactical flexibility there that you can take him off the field. If Fafa Picault or Santiago Mosquera, for whatever he's going to do for you, if they're not getting it done, you can remove that element off the field. Getting Brisson on the field was another consideration, because that was a guy that all last year Luchi Gonzalez talked about, and his professionalism. He was a starter for a big club down in South America, came here, was the ultimate professional, never complained about his role. But Luchi really liked him in training, so maybe get him on the field. Again, getting maybe 2 strikers on there. Maybe getting Jesus Ferreira into a position where he's that second striker, which is probably what he's better at, not the high man. And, if you look at Jesus Ferreira, some of us look at him and say, is he really a midfielder? Maybe, maybe not. Is he really a high striker? Maybe, maybe not. We all think he might be better as that underneath striker that gets him in the position. So I just think all of that stuff together, Lucci says, well, let's be able to go into that 3-man back line, 3-5-2, 3-4-3, whatever you want to call it, and see if we can just squeeze a little bit more out of everybody in this way. And then if, not, or on certain games, we go right back to what we know and what we drilled for a year, which they think, they know it well enough now. They can move back into that 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1, whatever you want to call it, and not miss a beat that way too.
So if we, instead of going on about Vancouver, let's move on to the next game, because we're going to all assume that the COVID positive tests have come to an end, and there's more than enough time for everybody to get healthy. And on July 15th, we have the most oddball scheduled of all of the games in the MLS's back tournament. The West Coast team, Seattle, and the Central time zone, Dallas, playing at 8 a.m. in the morning on the East Coast against each other, and this is always a fun game between the two. But as somebody who formerly lived in Florida, I am worried for the well-being of both these guys, because what I'm not sure everybody knows, the level of humidity in Florida up until about 11 o'clock in the morning is brutal. It's usually right at about 100%, and it's hot, and it will literally suck the life force out of you. So this will be an interesting slog of a game, I suspect, on the morning of the 15th.
Well, depending on how Seattle has adjusted their body clocks.
Yeah.
Because that's, correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, I think it's 9 a.m. there, 8 a.m. here.
6 a.m. in Seattle.
6 a.m. in Seattle. So, so they're dealing with that, and I'm
and you need hours of prep before that too.
Right.
You probably have to eat like a midnight meal, wake up in the middle of the night, and eat a meal, and go back to bed.
Right.
Yeah.
So well, they're going to bring some of that strong Seattle coffee with them. I'm sure they'll be just fine. But also, they can't have been 100% acclimated to it by then. So maybe Dallas catches just a little bit of a break here, and that they get to play Seattle, under what have to be less than perfect favorable conditions for both teams, but probably more so for Seattle, I would say.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, for sure. And the oddity is that the league scheduled this when there are two East Coast teams playing the night game the evening before. They're playing the 10:30 East Coast game between New York and Orlando on Tuesday, on the night before this game. So they could have just swapped them out, and it would have made a lot more sense. But they didn't call and ask me to help them schedule the tournament. So.
No,
maybe they should have.
They should.
Well, it would seem so obvious. Okay, anything in particular about that game that you guys want to talk about in terms of something to look for or think about, or it's just way too early to do that?
Well, we don't know a lot about them yet, but their two big ads this winter were a Brazilian midfielder named João Paulo and a Colombian center back, Yaimar Andrade. I don't know anything about either one of those guys, but they're supposed to be, when you bring in a big foreign acquisition, they're supposed to be mixed into the team, and I think you can expect both of them to be playing. How much they're going to affect the team and how much better they're going to make a team that's already really, really good is an important question, because you're talking about a team that still has Rui Diaz and Jordan Morris and Nicolas Ladero. I mean, Christian Roldan is like the guy you forget about. He's in the national team. This is a legitimately stacked team, and clearly our group favorites for me, even though I like FC Dallas's chances.
No arguments for me. It looks like Nico Ladero is healthy and available. So Jordan Morris, we all know how well he was playing at the end of last year, so they are, to me, clearly the group favorites. I would probably slot in FC Dallas right underneath that. Although I have some thoughts about San Jose that would worry me a little bit if I'm FC Dallas. So I think it's good that FC Dallas gets a little bit of an advantage in playing them early, and it'll be the best game of the group, I think.
And then we move over to the third game, which is on the 20th, 5 days later. It is a 7 p.m. Central Time start. It is the aforementioned Earthquakes. Now I'm dying to hear what Steve's insight about San Jose is.
Mateus Almeida.
Yeah.
He of the freshly shorn hair. He's been a bit. He's been a bit of a tournament specialist in his time at Chivas. If I'm not mistaken, he won 4 tournaments.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah. So a couple of Copa MXs. I think. Well, I know they won CONCACAF Champions League. So we talk about teams in World Cups as being good tournament teams, and teams that go into the tournament. They know how to manage the group. They know how to build as they go through the tournament. And so there is a little bit of a specialty. You have to bring the World Cup expert back on, Andy Swift, to talk about tournament specialties, but. I think there is a little bit of an art to that, and also, we know they play that different system, the man marking system. I think now, as teams really, they're just back into another preseason, and they're still worrying about, they're starting from the back. They work on build out, they work on midfield play. Now they start working on patterns in attack. One thing they're not working about is game planning specifically for. They can't spend a lot of time to game plan specifically for one system, and that's where San Jose can kind of get you. And also, let's don't forget that San Jose was just flummoxing teams with this system of theirs early last year, and then they just completely wore down because Almeida wore them down. So now they come in fresh. So I think San Jose could be one of the wild cards here.
Yeah, keep in mind that with a guy like Juan Lonowski on the bench, that having the 5 subs allows you a lot of tactical freedom to bring him in when you might not if you only had 3 subs. You can bring him in late for an impact, and if you're talking about a knockout tournament phase, if he can get his team out of the group, they can make some noise if they can get out of the group. Their new player is a one-name guy, Judson, in the midfield, who probably will get in there eventually for, I'm going to guess, Eriksson, because they still have Espinoza and Yule in the midfield, who are pretty good youngish players.
Do we? Can we all just safely? Well, I get you guys will know this. What do you think the likelihood Lucci was going to, either by hook or crook or forced necessity, and I guess now this question's too late considering the COVID situation, but what was the likelihood we were going to see a lot of the super youth on this team? There's Cervanius, Cerrillos, Thomas Roberts, those guys, Ricardo Pepi, getting time in the course of these 3 games, or was it really just an effort of just trying to figure out how to take your best 14 or 15 guys and get those guys squeezed out in those 3 games?
Well, you said it, man. All bets are off now, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's a great question because there's a lot that I think Lucci would want to juggle here, right? I mean, of course you'd want to get young guys on the field, especially as nobody's going to be in optimum shape. You've got 5 subs, so that allows you more latitude in getting more of those guys on the field. On the other hand, you've got a Brian Acosta who hasn't. I don't know when's the last time he had a match.
I don't know.
Some of the preseason, way back in preseason, before he got hurt, I think, or did he? Buzz, did he even play in the preseason? I can't remember. Or did he get that surgery in February?
Gosh.
I think he got the surgery in February. So I think the last time he actually played, now that I think about it, was last fall. So he needs some match sharpness. Thiago Santos looked good, but he's still adjusting to the team. So you still want him to. You want to get him on the field as much as possible. So there, a lot of different things are being juggled there, including now who's available.
Yeah. For me, you mentioned it, that Acosta, Brandon Cervania head-to-head is probably the best singular battle on the team right now. I mean, you can even throw Testament in that mix too. But those 2 guys are both – I actually personally rate Cervania over Acosta myself. So I think that's going to be an interesting one to watch.
Well, it's so hard to do this because we've just repeatedly said it's almost impossible to make any predictions of what you're going to get out of this tournament, just based on the fact that teams haven't been practicing. You don't understand how teams have been preparing. I mean, it's hard to predict how an MLS season's going to roll out at the beginning of the season, even after you've had all of the preseason games and ability to watch. We have none of that evidence or information in front of us. So this literally is just going into this whole thing blind, and maybe everybody should just go into it and just enjoy the darn thing.
Yeah, and you look, I think Lucci had one thing going for him, and that he had a closed-door exhibition against NYCFC. He was going to be able to, make some assessments. Frank O'Hara, how fit is he? Is he fit at all? Is Acosta in any way, shape, or form ready? Is Paxton going to get 60 minutes and then have a recurrence of is there going to be some soreness? He had one thing going for him, and now I don't know if that's going to happen. So even that just adds to the uncertainty of it.
Do we know if other teams have been are planning on having scrimmages or pre-tournament games? I haven't seen or read anything about that. Was that's Dallas
the only one I knew of?
Yeah, I don't know if the Dallas New York thing was unique or common amongst all the teams. Steve?
I don't think a lot of teams can. Buzz mentioned a while ago, teams are still getting into Orlando. As we sit here and record this, guys, what is it? July 2nd? Is that right? Is it first? Second? No, first.
First.
Yeah, it says today's first. Teams are still rolling in there. I don't know if they're going to actually have time. We know that they weren't allowed to have anything besides their scrimmages within the team before they left, right? Mm-hmm. So a team that gets in this weekend and then they play on the 10th or something. Do they even have time to do an exhibition? I think at some point it gets problematic just in terms of getting in there, getting that exhibition, and getting enough rest for everybody.
Yeah, by the way, Steve, happy halftime. We are on July 1st. We're halfway through 2020, so certainly we can have some sort of epic comeback in the second half of this year and overcome the drubbing we've been taking in the first half of the year.
I love your optimism, but right now
they had us at halftime.
Yeah, right now I feel a little Norwich against Arsenal, down by 2 or 3 at the half or whatever.
Wait, you're saying we're Norwich? Wait, wait, hold on a second. That means
not gonna lie, man. Not gonna lie.
That means saying if you're Arsenal is actually a good thing. That's pretty.
Oh, that's even more indicting, isn't it?
It is.
Right now, this 2020, we're striving to be Arsenal. Oh my
Yeah,
heavens!
some days I'm happy to be Arsenal.
Right.
You could just be Mesut Ozil, just sitting up in the stands under a parasol,
Under
enjoying
an
yourself.
Umbrella.
Cashing your fat checks, yeah.
Where was I going with all this? Oh, man, I had a thought off the top of my head, and now I'm trying to dig it back out. Either one of you have anything else that you guys want to talk about while I try to resurface that idea?
Yeah, I'll throw
First
something
of
in.
all, you're doing great. Go ahead.
Thing. I just wanted to say one thing about Vancouver is they have a new guy, Lucas Cavallini, who's a pure 9. They got him from Liga MX side Puebla. So going back to the 3-man line, defensive line for FC Dallas, it's entirely possible, because I think if you diffuse that guy, limit him getting the ball, you probably will be able to stifle Vancouver. So that all leads into the discussion of why you might see a 3-man back line against Vancouver.
Actually, this is perfect segue, because this is what I wanted to ask about, because I haven't had a chance to talk to Steve about it. That we've mentioned this before in the last couple of weeks, that the great news is for Dallas, Frank O'Hara has joined the team. We've heard that his visa's been approved. He hasn't received it yet, but by all accounts, he'll be available to play. I'm interested in your perspective, Steve. Everybody, for good reason, is excited about his addition. How long do you think it's going to take him? Because we've always heard, Oscar was very consistent in his messaging about the time it takes players to, acclimate to playing in Major League Soccer. What kind of turnaround time do you think we should anticipate with a player of that pedigree, coming into the team?
So I would say it's mostly contingent on 2 things. Number one, what is his level of fitness? And it's a weird time for everybody, man, because everybody shut down mid-March. This wasn't just Major League Soccer. So I think, I may be wrong. Liga MX may have gone another week or 2, something like that. But roughly the same time. So what is his level of fitness, and then what is his ability to do the right things in the press that Lucci wants? Because remember, that's why Zdeněk Ondráček didn't play early last year, mostly just because he wasn't on board with the pressing cues. And so in a high press, one guy doesn't do the right thing, the whole thing breaks down, and it frustrates everybody else. So that said, I think if you are a right back, if you're 6, certainly if you're an 8, and you've got all these patterns to learn on the build-out, you've got a pretty significant transition time. If you're a striker, again, just kind of assuming that he understands the pressing part, if you're a striker, you pretty much got one job, don't you? Get around goal and put the ball in the net. And as long as you can do that, if you can do that, once a game, well, if you can do that once a game, you're world class. But if you can do that, really score every other game, you're doing a great job as a striker. So I would say, in answer to your question, significantly less time in the understanding of a system if you're a striker as opposed to most other positions. Goalkeeper, I guess, would be the other one.
Buzz, you want to throw in there?
I think that was a pretty good synopsis for why it does not take as long to be a striker impact. The other side of that coin would be that I would imagine that Frank O'Hara has played a whole lot of time in the kind of formations that Lucci runs. You generally speaking, your 4-3-3, or the other things we've been talking about today, a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3, one of the two. And is not going to have any problem at all picking up a press. He was working on his own with some other clubs, not Pachuca. He was doing stuff at another club on his own to try and be fit. In the video they showed of him, he doesn't look bad by any means. Of course, we all know, Steve, and you know this for sure, and I know you do, Peter, that there's a big difference between game fitness and running around the training ground fitness, especially when you're training by yourself. These guys are all competitive, and I've made this point before. When you're competitive and you're doing a drill by yourself, you still do the drill pretty hard, but not nearly as hard when there's a dude right next to you banging the ball into the goal. You know what I mean? So it's going to be a real crapshoot as to how in sync the whole team is and how fit the whole team is. We have no idea what we're going to get because practice has been closed for 4 months now. So, cross your fingers that it'll be pretty quick. I will say that Hara was very good about saying all the right things about, his time will come when he gets fit and when he gets down with the system. And Lucci said the same thing. So, but you don't have your owner go out and get the guy he's been dreaming about for 3 years and then not play him. So I would bet money on sooner rather than later for him playing.
Yeah, and some guys, if I can add there, some guys will show up, and of course, they want to be good teammates. They want to go out and perform. They check the boxes. But then some guys come in and they are engaged. They are in it to win it right away. And everything you hear about him, I think we sort of saw that with Zdeněk Ondráček, right? But then just on the field, his technical ability just wasn't there. The speed of thought on some things. Like he was engaged, he was in it. Everybody loved his effort and what he brought to the locker room. But maybe he just didn't have the technical ability, and he wasn't sharp. And again, he wasn't confident maybe because he didn't know the right pressing cues. He wasn't getting playing time. With Franco Jara, I think he's got all of that. He's got the juice already, but he's come in, and from everything I've heard, he sits down with the coach. He's the one asking questions. It's not the coach asking the questions and him giving, whatever answers. He's the one asking questions. He's engaged. He is interested. When he goes to other members of the team staff, he is the one finding out, how do you guys do this? How do you guys do that? And to me, those are the little things that say they may have really stumbled on something here.
Well, that is all happening in due time. Hopefully we'll get to see him at least a little bit in the first game. It certainly provides fans something to be excited about, especially a signing like that. So I'm super hopeful, and it certainly worked out to the club's best favor the way it ended up transpiring in his arrival to the team. All right, so the games will start next week. Dallas has their first game against Vancouver on the 9th. Right now it's just kind of a waiting game to figure out which players are available, and if we have any more positive COVID tests. You can certainly just, as we said before, follow Buzz on Twitter or on the website, thirddegree.net, for all the latest information. And I do have one more question. Either one of you may know the answer to this. If Dallas was to get into a situation where they have even more positive tests and begin to kind of slack up on the roster, can Dallas or any team at this point bring players into the tournament from, could Dallas bring in players from North Texas if they needed to? Does anybody know the answer to that?
Well, Dallas has a couple of open roster spots. So they technically, in terms of the rules, they can add players. They'd have to get down below, I think you have to get below 14 and stay under 14 available players before you can do a hardship signing, but that's not a problem for them. I believe they've said that the roster rules have been loosened for this tournament, which to me meant, yes, you can bring in somebody if you need to. So they're allowed to bring sick players. Lucci said that for sure. Like if a guy had to stay home and then gets healthy, he can come. So there's nothing to prevent you to come to the tournament. So therefore, if you signed a player, he can come too.
I think even if you test, I could be totally off on this, but it seemed to me that I saw that Miami had one player test positive and then said everybody's traveling. So, so I don't. Wow. That may be, and maybe I'm just wildly off on that, but maybe it's possible you're even bringing somebody that tests positive and then just stick them in a bubble somewhere and tell them stay away from everybody until I'm not sure though.
Yeah, I guess you could quarantine them. I guess
I have a mental image of some guy just being stuck in a single room at the Swan eating really crummy looking sandwiches out of a paper box.
It might be down to that.
Yeah.
It's 2020.
The saddest of all the saddest situation for any Major League Soccer player. All right, gentlemen, one last opportunity to throw anything else in there that we have or I have forgotten. Buzz?
Well, let's do picks. Let's pick a winner for each group.
Oh no,
it won't take that long.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's fine. This is literally like throwing crap on a wall. Okay.
That's fun.
All right. Group A. Steve, you want to be the first to throw crap on a wall?
Seattle. It's easy.
No, that's not Group A. Group A is the big group with all the East.
You're right. I was looking at and I just wanted to cherry pick a little bit. Thanks a lot, Peter.
That's awesome.
Okay, no problem. So, how about if I can't pick Seattle, then let's give Oscar, let's give Poppy a little bit of love. Maybe because they'll be inspired by being the home team, and I know everybody loves NYCFC, but I'm going to pick Orlando, and I'm just going to die on the hill. How about that?
No, I think that, actually it's interesting you say this, because I'm wondering, Steve, have you heard from or talked to anybody that is aware of how his time in Orlando is going to date so far? Because I haven't.
I've heard absolutely nothing negative about it. Of course, we didn't have a big sample, before everything.
I don't even know. I don't even recall how their first couple of games went. Do you? I don't even.
I don't recall anything. I barely
I don't
recall
either.
you and me in Sunday's pickup game. I mean, I had to.
They were 0-1-1.
Sure. Of course, and I'm sure that it was. They were both 1-0 or 0-0. Wasn't it a 0-0 to start? Very awesome.
0-0 against Salt Lake, and then a 2-1 loss to Colorado.
Yeah,
That's
okay,
it. There you
yeah.
go.
Well, last week when we did the pod, I had to admit I couldn't even remember what Dallas's first two games were or what the results were. I just literally couldn't remember. And then in the course of the conversation, things started to come back. But good Lord, you're right. It does seem like it was a year ago. All right, Buzz, who's your Group A champion?
Yeah, well, I was gonna go out on a limb and picked Orlando second in that group behind New York City, and then Steve stole my thunder and went with them first. So home field advantage, and I think Poppy's a wizard. So I got New York City first, Orlando second.
It's a crapshoot. It's a tournament. I'm going
it's fun.
The power of pink. I'm going with Inter Miami CF because they got the new Breck Shea. So they're gonna be a dark horse group winner out of there.
Yeah, I'm picking them last because they thought they needed Breck Shea.
Okay, now we're Hey, but here's the deal. You have to give them credit that at least they signed Breck to a USL deal on low money and then promoted him to the senior team. At least they didn't give him the $450,000 Atlanta gave him.
Fair point. It was smart.
All right. So Group B is the Dallas group. Buzz, who are you picking?
I got Seattle as well as Steve, because he already said Seattle earlier.
All right. Well, screw you
Dallas
both.
second.
I'm taking Dallas to win the group. COVID or not. I'm being Dallas positive.
Yeah.
All right, C.
Why not? Dallas is being positive. You might as well be positive.
Oh, man, that's inappropriate, Buzz.
You're welcome.
Group C, Toronto, New England, Montreal, and DC United. I will go first. I'm gonna say Bruce Arena and the New England Revolution. I don't know why.
I know why, because it's the Bruce, and he always wants to show he's the smartest kid in the room, and so I'm with you, man.
Okay, all right, Buzz, who you taking?
Montreal.
Okay. Group D for Doom is.
By the way, that's probably the better pick. I think what Thierry Henry was doing with Montreal was really cool, and they darn near beat Dallas here, and so I really think that's a better pick. I just wanted to. It's just more interesting to pick the Bruce.
Group D is Salt Lake, Kansas City, Colorado, and Minnesota United. Buzz, you go first.
Sporting, I think Vermees gets it turned around fast, like as an amazing coach.
All right. Steve, who you taking?
I like that too, but don't sleep on Colorado. I'll pick Colorado just to be different because Robin Fraser had that team playing so well at the end of last year.
He's a hell of a good coach.
Yeah.
As we're seeing.
Yep.
Trying to think who. All right, I'll be different, and I will take Salt Lake. I don't know why, just to be different.
Okay, so now what we've done is we've all given Adrian Heath all exactly what he likes. Now he's going to say, "See, nobody picked us. Nobody picked us." Like you guys remember he was doing that all last year, and people kept saying, "Actually, Adrian, actually, people have picked you." No, nobody picked us. Nobody likes us.
Here's the crazy thing about Adrian Heath. We were having a discussion somewhere, either on this pod or on the show, about the oldest coach in Major League Soccer, and I immediately assumed it was Adrian Heath. And found out it's not. It's Bruce Arena, but there's no way Adrian Heath looks younger than Bruce Arena.
I don't know about that. Have you seen Bruce Arena lately?
Maybe I haven't seen Bruce in person lately. Does Bruce look pretty? Does Bruce look pretty tore up at this point?
I wouldn't say tore up, but but Bruce always had that little bit of low energy hang dog anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
He's stupid, that kind of thing. So
Oh, wait a second. Wait.
I'm not saying Bruce Arena is stupid.
No.
I'm saying Bruce Arena thinks a lot of people are stupid.
like
He says
dopey.
that a lot.
He's
dopey.
I need an entire podcast where Steve does his part in his Bruce Arena impersonation.
That would be fun.
Can we book you for that, Steve Davis?
I'll tell you another podcast. I'll tell you a great story about an interaction me and Bruce had, and maybe I'll do it all in Bruce Arena in imitation.
Okay,
Perfect.
that's fantastic. And then the final group is Group F, which is the group of fun. Both the LAs.
Wait, we've skipped E.
Oh, did we? Oh, we did screw.
Yep.
Oh, E for exception. Atlanta, Cincinnati, the Red Bulls, and the Crew of Columbus. I will go first, and I will take. I'll take Columbus as a dark horse.
You like Caleb Porter, huh?
Yeah, who cares? I'm not winning any money or losing any money on this, so why not
Right.
do something? Steve, who are you going to take? Atlanta?
Yeah, I'll take the chalk.
All right.
Go with Atlanta.
And Buzzard?
Yeah, I got FC Cincinnati to finish last.
That's just as valid, I suppose.
Yeah, I'll go with
It
Atlanta.
is.
I'll go with Atlanta also.
And then Group F for Forgotten, the two LAs, Houston and Portland. Steve, you go first this time.
Who was it when these groups first came out? Was it which of my ESPN guys? Was it Alejandro or I don't know who? But they tried to tell me that this was the group of death.
Yeah,
and I thought,
they
well, I
did.
mean, it's LAFC, and of course, the LAFC is very good, but we don't know about Carlos Vela. I like LAFC, but don't try to between the rest of them. I don't know what GSB Barcelona has in LA right now, and I'm not sure what Todd Ramos has going down in Houston and Portland. Haven't been quite sure about them since the middle of last year, so I think that one's all up in the air. I think it's going to be LAFC and then just a crapshoot after that.
Buzz?
Oh, I'm going to go crazy on this one. I'm going to say because they're going to be rested and healthy that Portland will win the group. Because Vela's going to bell. Because that's part of it.
Okay.
All right. Well, see, that's who I was going to pick, Buzz. So just to be different, I will go with the good old Galaxy because I will never, ever pick the Houston Dynamo for anything positive.
Well, to you guys' point, Portland's problem last year is they couldn't win back at home, so they're not at home. So maybe you're right.
Yes. Yeah, that is interesting that the home field advantage aspect of this is removed, and teams that are historically really good or really bad on the road or at home kind of becomes a non-starter in this entire conversation when just adding another reason why it's just an utter and total crapshoot.
No fans.
No fans, that's right.
Yeah, it'll change the atmosphere a lot,
Okay. All right. I think we got that done. We knocked all that out. Does that satisfy you, Buzz?
It does. Good. I thought that was fun. Thank you.
All right. Steve, any last notes before we end this sucker?
Nope. I really super hope that we get to see some soccer. We get to see MLS. The spiking rate of positive tests in Florida has everybody concerned, and rightly so. And again, they're spiking everywhere else. So again, I say I'm still not convinced that taking these guys out of their home markets, putting them in a bubble, isn't a little bit safer. And I hope that's the case, and I hope we get to watch some soccer very quickly.
Yeah, I agree with you. That theory was really good until people showed up with the COVID, and now suddenly
until it wasn't.
until it wasn't.
Until they got there.
Okay, Steve, Buzz, thank you so much for your time. It's always great to have you on, Steve. We need to get you on here more often, my friend.
Always happy to help, man.
All right, Buzz, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. If you like what we do, support us at patreon.com/Third Degree.
Yeah, go do that. Thank you, FC Dallas Curious fan. We will speak to you next week on another edition of Third Degree, the podcast.
Dallas Sports.